Alrighty, so hello everyone, bonjour tout le monde, and welcome to the last day and finissage moment for this intensive 5-day residency with Pulse HEMI and Concordia University's Research Chair in Performative Urbanism, whereby the research and activity was focused on critical performance-making practices in urban environments this week. We are streaming on YouTube live from Concordia University's fourth space, which is located on unceded Indigenous lands in Montreal. One of our formats or methods of engaging with research and development here at Fourth Space is through a residency, giving people space and time to work collaboratively, to explore the practices and expand research networks, hopefully. So on behalf of the entire Fourth Space team, thank you so much for all of your collegiality, curiosity, experimentation, and engagement this week. We'll go ahead and do a walkthrough of the space and the projects that have come to life this past week. And to get us started, it's my pleasure to pass the floor to Pulse Creative Director and Principal Investigator, Shona Jensen. Over to you, Shona.
Thanks, Anna. Thank you for space. So what we're going to do for a little bit of this afternoon is collectively take a walk through the work and the thinking and the sharing that we were doing here this week. And we were just having a big meeting this morning about what it means to do a residency and be holding this space together. And one of the ideas or the ethos of this week was, to accumulate traces from our time together, from our discussions together, from making together, from workshopping together. So every morning we had workshops. In the afternoons we had some round tables, a grad symposium. And this residency is also a major half of it it's a collaboration with the Hemispheric Encounters Project, and many of you we're all here as part of that kind of that community, and so bringing hemispheric perspectives into our thinking here in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal, Turtle Island. How does that inform or start to make us think about the shifting grounds of our practices together? And also, what does it mean to be in process and not always be running towards clear outputs? And so there's a lot of things resonating with us, and that's a key word from some of our discussions this morning and from the traces of another hemispheric encounter that was hosted in Toronto back in September. So that's just some context, but I think the resonating word is good, and that's what I want to find out more from all of you as we engage in dialogue with each other about the work that's now here at the end of our week. And I would love to start off actually with Maria Jose Contreras and talk to the future, and to find out a little bit more about what's been resonating with you and your time here this week and the performing that you've been doing. And we can also open that up to some more discussion. Maria Jose.
Thank you, Shona. Thank you, everybody. Sorry? Should we be looking there? No. Okay, sorry. Well, this has been really an amazing experience all the week, getting to know so many amazing people, folks, having the opportunity to work together. And I would say that what has been resonating with me is this idea of vibrating together, and how this takes so many shapes and forms. Like when we are making something together in a workshop, like our bodies, I can feel are really like in synchrony. They are tuning together. And here in my work in the bubble, the bubble kind of sets up a space for this communal vibration. So while I'm listening to the words, I also feel I am connecting with the affects of those that come into the bubble. And that's something that happens like in my stomach, in my chest, in my spine. And so I have so many open questions to think about in the next weeks, is how really performance as an encounter can produce this vibration, can produce this co-orientation that we have spoken about during the week, But also, and this is the question that is haunting me now, how do we make that resonance endure and project into the future? We have spoken a lot about like our encounters that are ephemeral, that are sometimes brief. So my question that I take home as an artist is, how can we continue to resonate, or how can we create the conditions for a resonance that endures in time, or that has echoes or projects in time?
Oh, I've got a mic. Thank you, Maria Jose. I wondered if anybody as part of our collective here in the residency this week would like to respond or have something to add about your experience of talking to the future and resonating with Maria Jose.
I don't know much about the project and I haven't experienced it yet. Can you talk about it?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So this performance is called Talk to the Future. The first iteration was made within the context of a project that's called the Zip Code Memory Project in New York, where we were looking at how the pandemic caused so many different effects and how it raised so much issues about equity, and how different neighbors, that's why it's called Zip Code Memory Project, were affected in so uneven ways throughout New York. So I thought about this as a time capsule. So the first iteration, I invited people in different parts of the city of New York to come inside, and I asked them, what do you think that future generations should know about COVID? So people not only shared their present experience, but the exercise was really to think together about the future. And that's why I think about this performance as conjuring a future, to pick up some magical language that we heard yesterday from Tracy. So we are like doing a spelling together in this resonance about the future. And in this iteration for our residents, I open it up. The questions that I ask people are not related to COVID, but they are related to the future. So how would you explain the present times to the future? How do you think that we can resonate together or come together again? And finally, what would you write to the future? So everything that you see written here are words of people from our group, from our residency, but also people, I made the performance on the streets that had come in and just shared their fears, anxieties, hopes, and images about the future.
Thank you, Maria Jose. Anybody else? Yes.
Thank you for all of this. First of all, it's been such a pleasure to be able to see it emerge, to see the kind of volume of words actually come into physical space, and to be able to hold these words is really special. And I think thinking about like keeping this kind of collective vibration and this energy, I'm like returning to a word that was really a focal point of last night's roundtable of holding. And when everyone was speaking, I was thinking about holding, and I remember that Jane Bennett was saying that there is kind of like a dark underside of holding, it can actually be kind of like a capture. And it got me thinking about holding and labor, and the relationship between, this gesture of care, but also what are we expecting from this gesture? What will we get back from it? And are we doing it with the anticipation of reciprocity, or are we doing it out of martyrdom or general just care? And so that's been kind of something that I've been thinking about, and I think that your work is a really great example of how the duration of holding can kind of be played with, and so I think it's actually it's elucidating some thoughts on that, because it's not keeping the words forever, but giving them enough space and time to actually be absorbed with and interacted with, but not trapping them.
Thank you, Aya. Yes, Camille.
Thank you. It's interesting because when I met Shona, we met under this bubble that was just arriving and smelling like plastic. And I was very aware, I was very surprised first that when you asked me these big questions, the answer that arose were pretty positive and optimistic. And then I was also aware of the way you were listening. And I was wondering how do you prepare yourself to be able to offer not only this physical container, but also this container of care and listening? And how do you deal with receiving all these informations and maybe all these emotions that arise when people answer your questions?
Thank you. I think it's a learning process. Like the first times that I did it, I just like sat there and didn't really prepare in any way. Now that I've been doing it for some time, it really requires a labor and a connection with myself in order to be present. And for me also, it's a very unique experience to devote this 100% attention to someone talking to me. Like in my daily life, as many of you maybe also, we are so distracted about so many things. So it's really, for me, also something very, very important in my own experience of slowing down, pausing, and just being present. It's somehow like meditating. And I think of myself inside of the bubble as someone metabolizing these affects, because they, like people tell me, they resonate in my body. And then a very important thing is that I write them down. Like, I think that that's a way of, like, that's why I'm a medium and not like a vessel or a container that keeps it. It's like the gesture of writing it down, and that you can read it is really passing it to you too. So it's like a sharing, because I think it would be really, really difficult to keep it within myself. Because sometimes it is positive, but sometimes also people express anguish about the future or fear about uncertainties. So there's a lot going on. And I remember Jane yesterday talking about this transitional space between the baby and the mother. And Winnicott, this psychoanalyst that she was talking about, he explains how the mother, like the baby, transfers things that have no words, feelings, and then the mother can metabolize and return them. And that's the process of gaining subjectivity, according to psychoanalysis, and gaining words and language. Of course, it's not in that scale, but in somehow I do feel that that's what's going on too. Like, I received things, because also when I ask this question to people are surprised, like none of us are thinking about this in our daily lives. So yeah, there is this transfer, this movement of metabolizing these things and affects.
Thank you, Maria Jose. I think if nobody else has any responses or questions, I'd love to move on and keep moving through this space. Thank you so much. And I'm wondering if, Amanda, you want to lead us through, give us some context for our bigger public who might be tuning in about what you've prepared for us to engage with today.
Hello, and hello everyone who is in your homes. You might be witnessing, or you might pass through when these collages were here for a few hours. So I'm going to give you the context, because there was a lot of questions like, what is this? Who made this, right? So this was actually a collective creation that it was developed through a workshop that I helped facilitating as part of Collage. Feministes Montreal. And we did work for a few hours collectively as well on 4 sentences that kind of capture the main ideas that we have as a side writing event in relationship with the university. So as you can see, this is not just, phrases to provoke, although they provoke a lot of questions, but it was also response within our collective thinking of things that we see that are circulating and are happening. We are naming some of the problems that we see, experience, and also we want to express. So as you can see, one of the most controversial, but I hope it's not only stopping in controversy and shock, it can be also taken in consideration as a self-reflective process of what is happening in academia. And academia is also related to class and class privilege and race privilege. So we were voicing those those issues that are real, that are present, but it's hard to swallow. It's hard to actually embrace that. And something that I learned by this is that when you put folk in white and an academic context, that's going to create a lot of issues. And the question is, who is questioning this? Who feels attacked? Who feels actually threatened by these words? And I would love to actually, after I finish talking, to hear the reflections that we've been thinking through these days and what it means to have a subversive artwork within institutions. How long also the institution can hold those voices of criticism is also related to, even in liberal context of academic freedom, there is a point where we cannot trespass, right? And portable privilege, I think, is also one of these phrases that is not pinpointing anyone. It's just, visibilizing through words, through linguistics, something that actually is hard to accept, but is also embodied every day by ourselves also as academics. So I think other point that I wanted to say, and I want to acknowledge, thank you to Fourth Space to embrace with us and also allow this space to be a contested space for a few hours till let's see what happens. It was a total experiment in a way. And then they arrive with actually the staff of cleaning, the cleaning staff to start removing. And one of the words that I saw that were the first ones to be removed, as always, is folk and white. And then outside was feminist. So what that means, what we want to delete when we go directly to target those words. Those are important reflections. And then I say, we are going to clean. You don't have to clean. And this is an act of not allowing them to erase us, right? It's a kind of an act of identification. And I really, really thank you that everyone who was gluing stay even after this, the last conference, the last talk, and we were cleaning. And for some reason, I never saw so much joy in jokes and ironies about how much power is being hold in that space of performance within ourselves, or as a group. So I really thank you for going through all this experience. I did not foresee that will happen, but I'm actually happy that happened in this succession of actions, and that you were with us, that we were a collective, even till the last end of taking whose feminists live here, which was the last one. So I just print some of these photographs, and you can see the faces of everyone smiling. And I wonder what that means, right? What that means. And thank you so much. So if anyone wants to like talk or like share their own experiences, their own thoughts, what happened and how this became. Yes, sir.
So this is something that I've said to a lot of the people here, but maybe not everyone. So I'll just say it out loud. I don't think we've talked about this, Amanda. But what I found really incredible about this experience and this action was it helped me to rethink how effective this methodology is for engaging or creating a dialogue around a set of political issues. And that site specificity is not only about the immediate site of the encounter, in other words, the window that these phrases were put up on, but that there are secondary sites that are equally important, in this case, in the context of the internet, where in fact, those who might not feel comfortable coming up and engaging in a dialogue about what they think about those phrases do feel comfortable in other spaces to share exactly what they think. And so I think that even if it got taken down, like 2 hours, 3 hours after it was put up, it remains, like that performance remains, and there are echoes of that in social media. In our case, I think probably everybody knows this by now, but on Reddit, that there were, from the way that I read it, a number of comments from white students who are talking about how they feel that there's a lot of racism against them as white students, and about how BIPOC students get all the advantages at the university. So this was nonsense, these phrases. And so what this action did is it helped to out those perspectives, and it precisely literalized the pointing at you that was performed in the phrase. So for me, it was incredible that it was able to do that. We have an archive of that dialogue now.
And also, I'm thinking about the collective gesture to build this, because to write each word, we had many discussions about, because when we started to think which phrase put there, we also said, okay, we don't want to do a kind of, advertisement for space. It's not about, come in, come over, join us, where you are welcome, but also how we also think what means this institution, and how much is already informed by this architecture and this relation with the street. This is a public space, and these open windows is informing some kind of transparency between the private and the public. But actually, how many of those people who are crossing the street is using the resource that is inside of here to fuck over the white supremacy and the white Concordia? Because it's not just to use the resource, but also how we can co-orient the resources to the struggles that we have to do, to mobilize the university as a political space, a critical space of thinking and gathering people to do something together. So so how I think the workshop that we had the opportunity to learn from you, from your collective, was very powerful to think about the how the collective act also can be very powerful. So thanks for that.
Yes, thank you so much, because you actually touched base of something that is really important. It happened yesterday as well. Yesterday was one of the meetings, year meetings with the collective, and we actually, I show them this, and we reflect upon what it means, right? And we actually, all the materials that were a lot, It was not a leftover, it was intentional. I bought a little bit more to redistribute the resources that this residency gave for further actions. So actually, members of the collective that didn't have for brushes or ink, they actually made use and is there for further political actions. So the redistribution of these resources can be symbolically speaking through, for example, reflecting on this echoey, but also physically and practically speaking, using this allowances or this monies also for further actions. And the most incredible thing about this is that these materials are going to serve also for other workshop for teenagers in Montreal. So, and it's thinking about how patriarchal systems are actually one of the bigger issues that collage feminists are thinking about is how patriarchal systems are extremely oppressive, but also how the public space are spaces of side writing, political side writing. And something that I learned from this, and I'm going to finish with that, is that it's a detonation. This was like a detonation of what happens when actually these issues face back into the space that is criticizing. And that's the power of these sentences. When they speak upon what is made, what is the symbolic meaning of that space within the words.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to kind of like take the opportunity of what you're talking about in terms of the redistribution of resources from institutions and kind of bring it to like a larger hemispheric context maybe and discussion, because I do believe that it's our responsibility being part of these institutions, right? To think about like how the resources go back and forth in many different ways through the continent. So I'm talking basically about, you know, if you compare how mining companies, right, from the north go to the south and they bring the resources from there, and they've been doing it for 500 years, right, here. And then those resources in some way nurture these institutions that we have in the north, right? So I think it's kind of our responsibility to figure out smart ways, I would say, or I mean, I don't want to say that it's tricking the institution, because it's not tricking it, because that money should go there, right? But in a way, how those resources can be brought back, right, in order to subvert these structures of hierarchical structures of power and how the resources, and it's the same thing, for example, when the US talks about guns, right, and gun violence. I mean, all of those, many of the guns that are actually like seen in Mexico for drug trafficking, for example, they come from the US, and it's part of their system, you know, of this system of power. So the drugs go in one way, the arms go in a different way, and then people migrate following those same paths, and avocados go the other way. You know, it's all interconnected. Honestly, the avocados are a big part of the problem. Avocados are all controlled by the drug dealers now. They make more money out of avocado than of drugs, basically. So I don't know, I'm just thinking about all these networks of resources, hemispheric networks of resources, and how we are implied in those networks, and how, you know, what should we do about it, right? Or how can we do something about it together? No, thinking about it together as we are right now. Yeah, thank you.
Unless somebody wants to talk, but if not, we can do it later.
Did you go ahead, Rowan?
Yes. Well, I'm just thinking about the floor of resources, and I want to talk personally about situatedness, because as a scholar and a feminist scholar, I often think about my own experience first before I take the next steps. And this was a profound movement for me. You know, working class scholars talk about the ways in which they have to dissociate themselves in their labor histories from becoming an academic. So who gets to be an academic, right? And so this moment for me was so beautiful, because I was cleaning with people. We were cleaning together, and it was art, and we were theorizing about it. And so I found that was really a profound moment, and an opportunity, I think, for folks on Reddit to think about the ways that they can think about whiteness and ways they can be in solidarity. Because for me, it felt like a moment of being white and working class roots, now an academic, and how I stand in solidarity through labor.
super fast. Yeah, and like I was also kind of struck by like for a couple of days like after Tuesday, like at least once or twice a day, I would like after everything had been taken down already, I would see students kind of with their pull their friend aside and like look, and they were clearly talking about what they had seen on Reddit or like the pictures they had seen. So I love that even like it's all connected, like it started here and that activation started here and then it moved to Reddit, and then that is still informing the way people kind of interact with the site here.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jaina. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, everybody, for that conversation. We're going to move on to Rowan's piece here in the space and just hear a little bit more from Rowan about what's resonating and visiting the hum of the hive. So we're going to travel over here, and because there's some additions to when you started this week, Rowan. Over to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. And I think further reflections on labor and also thinking about multi-species engagement and who does the labor of the planet. One of the things we talk about is pollinators. I mean, honeybees are the gateway drug to multi-species thinking, right? Because everyone understands the honeybee, because the honeybee brings us honey. And actually we box in honeybees to collect their honey. And honeybees are, in some places, migrant labor. So honeybees are shipped from almond field to almond field to do the work of pollination. And so as part of a project at the University of Winnipeg called Swarm, where we engaged with bees and bee ecocultures, I developed this work called Hum of the Blue Hive. And it's actually a hex, and it's a part of a 6-part video series where I'm thinking about how can we become better humans on the planet. So it was a reflection in particular of the bumblebee and thinking about sound and coming back to this notion of vibration, because sound is through vibration. This is a real resonance here, and to actually stop and take a moment to listen. So one of the things we've been doing here together at Force Space is thinking through listening practices. There's been all sorts of accumulations around listening. And how do we listen? You know, one of the scholars and musicians that I've been thinking about a lot has been Pauline Oliveras, and just the idea of deep listening. And how do we listen through our body? How do vibrations enter through our body? And can we, in this kind of quantum listening, as she talks about it, listen to ourselves listening? And so Hum of the Blue Hive is really an experiment in that, as well as an experiment in the color blue, the borage plant. I came to the color blue through Derek Jarman's film called Blue, which was his reflection on the AIDS pandemic. So this was created through COVID, and just really thinking about all of these different connections that were happening. And so during COVID, I ripped up my front lawn, and I suggest everyone rip up their front lawn and make it someplace more hospitable to pollinators. And I just planted and I tended plants, these vegetal creatures, and I listened. So I'm interested in questions, engagement.
Thank you, Rowan. Do we have anybody who wants to relate or has questions for Rowan? Yeah, Sergio.
I would like to hear more about this, this case of the small that it's informed in your work. We had some comments how we can see this really, a small piece that actually is pixelated, but actually it's very small portion of land, right? And you can see how they are moving a lot. There is a lot of intensity, a lot of movement in this very small portion of land. So if you can share something about this. Well,
I've been thinking a lot about how to craft forms that can hold the intensity of experience. And what kind of forms can hold the intensity of experience. And I was also thinking about intense surveillance and the use of visual cultures and visuality to capture movements of animals of all kinds. So I was really questioning my focus on the visual through the camera, thinking about how do you hold the intensity of experience. And I felt like pixelation was a way to do that. So one, I felt in my development of friendship with the borage plant and the humble bumble that I hadn't really been in a place yet that I could photograph them. What was consent? What was surveillance? You know, what was my relationship through visuality to capture their being in that way? And so that was partly the pixelation, thinking about how do we look at something. As soon as I turned off this kind of visuality, I started listening better as well. And so it was also a movement into sound. So a movement into sound, questions about relationship with vegetal creatures, with the winged ones, and yeah, how to hold this intensity that I was experiencing in the garden.
Thank you. This is a comment. I love like how the pixeling really captures the intensity, but also the movement. And so it really speaks to me while looking at it or experiencing it, the movement of life and relationality, because I find so important what you say about the ethics of capturing an image of another being and the ethical problem about consent that we usually don't think about when we are relating to other species. So here I really think it's an incredible gesture of capturing, not holding the movement, and holding that tension in the seeing and in the listening. So, yeah.
I think the relationship, and I think it was Selena who suggested to me, or just started talking to me about the power of friendship, because I'm really thinking, is this kinship that I'm feeling with those winged creatures, or is it friendship? And so then I was also thinking about gift economies, because I was thinking one of the amazing things that I learned about the borage plant is that when the bumblebee is headed towards the borage plant, it'll actually sweeten its nectar and create more nectar for the humble bumble. And I was like, what a beautiful gift economy, that flower is so happy when the humblebee comes toward them. And so I asked the question, as a human, how could I create that relationship when the plant was so excited, the flower was so excited that I was there, or the bee was so excited that I was there? And of course, the garden is this site of gift economy. And this movement was everywhere, lawn on one side of me, lawn on the other, and then this urban garden. And there was just movement everywhere above my garden.
Thank you, Rowan. I think we'll keep moving if nobody else has any other responses or comments. And I'm going to bring us over actually to Tracy's work. Follow Tracy over here.
Hi, everyone. This is a little altar display that brings traces of a land-based, site-specific art piece that I co-made with Allison Mitchell and Deirdre Logue in the spring and summer of 2021. The piece is a field-sized pentacle, now called the Pentacular, thanks to Jane Rendell, that was mode into this fallow field, and each of the 5 points of the star had a meaning and an altar. And you can see some of these altar signs here. I didn't mention yesterday the artists who made the paintings and the altar, so I'll just say their names really quickly right now. So Ella Dawn McHugh painted many of these signs. I also painted these signs, and then Ella and I, along with Kalali Dalton and Allison Mitchell and Deirdre Logue, actually built the altars that you all saw yesterday. So thanks for giving me a chance to say their names out loud. Okay, so the pentagram was a bit of a spell working, an offering, an opportunity for collective embodied process to move between these points of love to connection, to grief, to accountability, to healing. And as 60 people walked through this ginormous field on a really hot summer's day, we had thousands and thousands of seeds, native seeds mixed into soil, and we grabbed handfuls and we dispersed as we walked this giant meditation. And one thing that really beautiful thing that came out of yesterday's conversation was how we had the opportunity to face each other and to also face some of the very difficult things that we are encountering in dealing with this world we live in particular, kind of in the interest of kind of composting colonial histories in the interest of decolonial futures. I'm borrowing some of that language from Vanessa Andrade. So here's this altar. I encourage you, if you haven't, to engage. I arrived with pods. I picked this one because it's still almost closed. Most of these I brought were very closed when I arrived here on Sunday. And over the week, they've offered themselves up. And they are a native plant to southern Canada. And if you want to, you're welcome to grab some and tuck them in your pockets. There's a couple of envelopes left here that you can fill and take. They belong here. They are also very attractive to pollinators, and as Rowan keeps reminding us, to monarchs. And they love to be winter stratified, so they need a cold season. So now's the time to disperse these around the city, and in gardens, in front yards, in cracks, in the sidewalks. And I encourage you, if you don't know what this common milkweed looks like, to take a look at it. It's a humongously strong, tall, robust, beautiful plant. And then at the end of the season, it lets these pods go. And if I hadn't picked them, I picked them actually from my front yard because my front yard is so full of them now that I'm trying to redistribute. They will just disperse themselves like this in the wind. There's also other seeds from my backyard garden that you're welcome to take. Not all of them are native, just so you know that. And I'm happy to talk to you about what they are. So that's here. And then if you haven't yet, I added these later this week. These are flower essences. They're actually elemental essences. So sort of like metaphysical medicine in a way, metaphysical support. And I've made these, some in collaboration, some of my own. And some of them were made on site where this pentacle was first built, and some were made in other places. There are descriptions here on what the benefits are to these, so if you're interested, you can take a look and see what resonates for you. And I guess to close, I'll just say that all of this is really built in relationship to my collaborators, and in relationship to the land and to the body itself, and how we carry collectively these resonances together. So I don't know if anyone has questions or comments.
I have a comment. There is something that resonates a lot to me besides the big relation of walking and the pentagram, but right now that you are commenting on, and also the relationship of paganism, and most importantly, witchcraft. And I'm saying this because those are situated acknowledges that we don't, or sometimes we don't consider that are really meaningful in relationship with our ancestry. And in my case, my grandmother and my grandmother, they did practice a lot of herb medicine, in everything that came from their garden, or in this case, when they were living in la Sierra Madre Zapoteca, the seeds, the mushrooms, magic mushrooms, elements that are earthly elements, they really resonated with well-being, but also alternative forms of cures, like not cures, but healing. A healing process. And this really reminds me of that, because you are bringing these tinctures, this specific bodily concentration of, of earthly things. And you are sharing that. And when you say, I give you this, the gift that I can take, I think that's more powerful than just saying like, I'm free to take. No, it is like it's like an open invitation to be part of a symbolic process of ritual, a ritual with your own land, but a ritual with your own beliefs. It might not be the same as mine, because maybe I'm coming from this other situated knowledges, but like, how do we speak outside of the perhaps hegemonic culture of Christianism, that at least to me, that was very oppressive when I was growing up. So understanding paganism as part of this collective thinking and way of bonding, it's super important from your project.
I'd welcome more comments, but I'd like to thank you for that. And just to say that it has been interesting for me in to be doing this in a more public way, to just acknowledge that there are epistemologies that come out of witchcraft that are extremely useful, especially when we are listening, when we're listening to the land, or when we're listening to our Indigenous friends, our lovers, teachers, elders. When we do those kinds of listenings, like, we have tools that, for me, popped out, and we're like, I have some language around this, and I have some symbols, and I have practices to lean on. And so thank you for acknowledging that. And I also wanted to add to that thinking around healing, that for me, and the intention of the pentagram too, is really, it is a collective and a political move. It isn't just about a person trying to find their way or trying to find their body. It is really intentionally a collective, even in its making, was a super collaborative, relational love affair in some ways. And then also the first time 60 people walked through it together, like that's where the true magic manifests.
I just want to add something to what Amanda was already saying. Something that for me is very moving about how you're presenting the project and the project itself is how subtle it is, because, and especially looking at that word accountability, right? Because I think that there are many contemporary approaches to epistemologies of the South, or non-hegemonic epistemologies, that are very extractive, right? So this idea, for example, of going, ayahuasca rituals, right? And then suddenly they're commodified and brought outside of their cited context, right, and brought to other places and just commercialized, right, for the sake of, for healing as well. It's a very complex circumstance, right? But I think what you're doing with the people you're working with collaboratively, it's very different, right, because it's subtle, and I think that subtleness is what allows for further communications, between different epistemologies and different knowledges, and for new knowledges to emerge in some way, but subtly. It doesn't need to be, and that's being accountable, right, of what you're doing. So I truly appreciate that, that the way of, not only what you're doing, but the way of doing it, right, which is collective and subtle and caring and careful. Yeah, thank you.
I think Laura.
I just wanted to say something that I said to Tracy after her presentation yesterday, but I think it resonates also with a number of the works that are in the space, and I'm thinking mostly about Rowan's that just came before, that there's something very important and moving about the larger environmental or site context in which these pieces are situated. So it's that there is a kind of feminist making of space that's happening even as there is the site-specific work happening. So in the context of Tracy's work, like the fact that this is happening with Allison and Deirdre, who are very important figures in the Toronto and Canadian performance and art community for making feminist space in unusual places and often on one's own property. That you're making your garden into a performance space, that they're making their farm into a performance space, and before that, their backyard was a feminist art gallery that people from all over the city could go to. I just find that the fact that this work is situated there really important as well.
Feminist scenographies.
I just wanted to add something, and we actually with Sarah were speaking about it yesterday as we were biking up to my legs. It's how what is unspoken in your work as agency and is informing us in a way that is very subtle but very effective at the same time. So, and I think this is decolonization also. This is undoing the fact that knowledge has to be said, but also knowledge is what is unsaid, what is unspoken and invisible, and that is infiltrating our thinking and our bodies in ways that transform us and inform us. And I think it's not an easy thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to add to that like it's really important for me too in the method to know that I have tools and information and practices, but that it's to go back to holding. I talked a lot about the circle holding yesterday, but in this case, it's a critique of holding, like that I don't hold the answers. I don't hold the full picture, that we don't. And I think that this is an attempt, an invitation to listen, to say something, to do something, to be in a space of transformation, but to also be ready and willing and open to what that transformation might bring, whether that's more listening or doing or saying, whatever it is, that there's a lot of space for exchange, I think.
Yeah, I think we should move. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you too.
And I think it would be great actually to move on to HEMI, who's just around the corner, for you to your installation with Mode, if you like to share a bit with us about that.
So I am very aware that my partner in crime is not there because she's going through a lot of things. And so it informs our work in many different ways. I'm also very aware to the fact that there is a lot of opacity in the work, and that's not easy to understand it. And I think at the beginning of the week, I felt very, I struggled a little bit with that. I was like, oh, no, that's not the good way. Because I really enjoy doing the work, but I felt that I wasn't able to really share the work in a way that worked. So that's just a little bit of reflection. So with Maud, we began this work at the end of September, and we decided to use actually the size of the floor space and explore the space going up and down to the 12 different floors. And as we did that, at some point it was very clear that there were ghost presences. And we tried to find a way to not really capture, but harvest these presences in different ways. Taking pictures, writing texts. And one of the protocols that we had was counting our feet. So we were like 1, 2, until 8 or until 100. And then exactly at 80 or exactly at 100, we were stopping. And then the only thing we were allowed is to do this. So actually what happens is you never stop where you want. And then something happened because you receive what I call oracles, signs. And it's not oracle that are speaking about the future or what will happen. It's more like an activation of attention and presence. So that's maybe what I can share. And maybe I will just share a little text. So I really invite you to take one of the postal cards. Choose 1, 2, 3. Some are with English, and I saw that there are some mistakes on the English version, but that's okay. So being a ghost is not being a human. I would say being human is not being a ghost. A ghost has no organs. A ghost is like a light. A ghost is like a perfume. A ghost is like a breath. A ghost has many ages at the same time. A ghost is like a memory. A ghost can change its name. A ghost knows how to make itself heard. A ghost crosses the borders of time and space. A ghost can be very close or very far. A ghost is at work. A ghost has a mission. A ghost leads an investigation. A ghost remembers, laughs, is crying. A ghost is a catalyst of presences. A ghost wavers the boundaries of reality. A ghost haunts. Haunts, sometimes. A ghost wants to be heard. A ghost can take the form of a bird, can take the form of a spider. A ghost can take the form of a cat. A ghost puts us at work. A ghost transmits messages. A ghost plays with signs. A ghost has a sense of humor. A ghost can change its shape. A ghost comes and goes. A ghost likes to be outdoors. A ghost has its moods. A ghost is a territory. It's a ghost work to take care of the living. Thank you. And maybe a last thing, like the yellow apron was really, well, it was what we realized. It was activating a way to be at work, being so visible that we became invisible. Because here, it's very public, you have a lot of people, but then we go to the other floor, you have the IE floor, for example, or the mathematics floor, and the history, Department of History, and then people were like, because we had the aprons, they accepted us. So I felt it was a way to be in between worlds, to be traveling in these very porous borders in between the living and the dead. And I think it's really need to be explored more with the protocol and also archives. Maybe you saw these maps. So we were looking for archives of the building, and we found beautiful ones. In between them, there were these 2 maps. So that's the first settlement. So you really see the territory, the land, and then the first square of the first settlements, which is really striking. And then the other one is with all the body of waters. And on some of the picture, you will also know the name in Anishinaabe, in Kanyangeaga. and I found in different indigenous language, but I decided to choose the Kane and Geaga language. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Camille. Well, I know we feel the presence of the absence of your partner in crime, Maud. Yes. I wonder if anybody has any comments or questions or reflections for Camille.
I really loved encountering this work. It was, first of all, your presentation. I really enjoy how immersive it is, and also how the images are floating in an absence. And it's kind of an invitation to become part of that set of images when we encounter it. But when you said there was a lot of opacity in your work and you were holding that postcard, I misinterpreted, thinking that you meant literal opacity. And that particular image, and I know there's a lot of images in this collection of images that do deal with kind of holes. And I would love to hear more about that, but it really reminded me of the work of Gordon Matta Clark and his An Architecture, which really is playing with the presence of absence, and absence as an invitation for production. So yeah, I'd love to hear about the holes.
Thank you. That's a really good question. It's actually part of the protocol. We were like taking pictures through holes on a piece of paper, and it was to help us actually, when we were stopping, to really let the sign arrive to us instead of wanting to take a specific picture. And as artists, we have this, we have ways of working. We have ways of things that we like, certain kind of, way of taking pictures. And it was like to inverse that process, to stop us actually extracting something from the space that would be interesting, and then let the signs really come to us. And then, of course, it's an aesthetic also process where all the picture were holes. And then when we were like seeing them and superposing them with the different layers, it was giving us a sense of how they connect to each other and talk to each other, these different signs. It was a way really to, make choices in that way. So it's really this kind of apparition. And also with ghosts, it's really like, they are very subtle signs. They are very fragile, I would say, and vulnerable. So, and they repeat themselves, and as they repeat themselves, they become stronger and talk to each other. And sometimes they are not, they create paradoxes. They are not, they don't actually agree with each other. And these tensions are interesting because they speak about time and space and material and opacity, and holes is also the hole of imagination. So a little hole, and then you really enter the hole and you expand the hole. And it's coming from an anthropologue and philosopher, Vinciane Després. She's speaking about her research is based on the relationship in between the dead and the living. And she's actually speaking about this hole and how you enter the hole and extend them.
Do you have a question, Margaret? Yes.
I have a quick question. Just after doing this work, is there another place you'd like to haunt? Take this work. Could you see it happening again in another building, another setting, or yeah?
I would love actually to share the protocols and see what people do with it. I feel this is really something that can be shared. So that's one point. I think ghosts put me at work, and I will ask them what they want me to do and where I am supposing to go. I think there is like a thread that I'm still discovering. Yeah, they are everywhere. When you begin to take attention and ask them questions, suddenly they're present in your dreams, in your they begin to play with your day. Yeah.
Thank you, Camille. And I think we're going to move on now to, I'd love to head over to T, your work on the other edge of this space.
All right, we're going to the corner. I'll just wait a moment. You can stand where. No. You can come closer. You can come closer. Don't worry, you're not in the metaverse yet. You can come closer. Yeah, you're good. Should I start talking or should I wait a moment? I'm good?
You're good, sorry.
Okay,
good.
great,
All
no
good.
problem.
Over to you.
All right,
you.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm T. I know most of you already. So this is a strange project to talk about in this context because most of it's not visible in the physical realm. This is not my work, for example. But as I was listening to everybody else speak, it occurred to me that that is a characteristic of a lot of these projects and practices, that a lot of it is not visible in the physical realm, or, there are these resonances, there are these traces. So I feel less weird about talking about something that you can't see. So this project is called Meta Eternity. So it's a collaboration with Ayodamola Okunsende, who's based out of New York. And we've done a series of projects, but this one is called Meta Eternity. And what we were thinking about is, as we enter the metaverse, how, when, why, I'm not sure exactly when that'll happen, but how do we make sense of our social, material relationships there? How do we enter as political beings, as social beings, as lovers, as friends? And how do we enter in a way where we're not just receiving it through like virtual reality, for example, but how do we move in there intentionally and not just kind of repeat some of the most horrific problems we see here in this plane? So what we've been doing to kind of start to ask some of those questions and kind of build this collective conjuring of the metaverse. I love the term collective, or sort of conjuring the future, with Maria Jose's bubble. So what we've been doing is asking people to sit down. We do these little workshops and draw or make little kind of quick paper objects of things that they want to place in the metaverse. So there are some of them over here from Monday that a lot of you participated in. So little lists of things. There's this beautiful drawing of a dinner that somebody wanted to remember having dinner in their mother's kitchen. Just scribbles. Somebody spit on a piece of paper. They want to bring their DNA to the metaverse in this way. Some physical things. Adela made these little shots of mezcal. And then, so what's really beautiful about hosting these workshops is being able to see people, well, first make sense of what's a very broad prompt, which is, what would you like to exist forever in the metaverse? And it's a confusing prompt, and many people, a metaverse is just a shared virtual world, but haven't spent a lot of time there. So watching people figure that out and then watching what emerges. So a lot of times it's about food, smells, connections with other people. And then, these beautiful little collections of things. What I do then is I take pictures of them, or if it's a 3D object, I scan it, and I put it into a game design program called Unity, and then put it into this collective manifestation of the metaverse. So if you choose to, when you choose to enter into the environment, you'll see material from, I think at this point, it's 5 different workshops, and it grows out from the center. So if you watched it the other day, you'll notice that some of those things have moved out further, and the things that you made on Monday are kind of more close around you. I also have, and the reason I'm kind of standing here is this is where you'll experience it. Today I brought 2 headsets, and I've created safety boundaries is what they're called. They're quite small. So once you start to move beyond the safety boundary, you'll see a big blue cage come up. And if you step outside of it, you'll see a live feed of the space. So something that I think is also really interesting is to invite people to move in and out of that space. The other person, your space overlaps a little bit. So you could also play with moving in and out of your partner's space or to communicate with them. So another thing we're looking at is how to kind of break down the insularity and kind of single player mode that VR is usually kind of designed to produce. How can we kind of live in both of these worlds at once and kind of continue having our relationships and our connections with one another as we do that? So that's the project.
Thank you, T. T, I was just actually curious, so after we finish this walkthrough, which we'll be wrapping up after we visit with Adela and Sergio, but we actually can come into this room
please
with
do.
You for the rest of the
Absolutely.
The afternoon when we finish the walkthrough. Okay,
yeah,
great.
And if you haven't had a chance to make something, if you want to make something else, I brought the paper and the markers and stuff again, and I'll continue adding the material. It's just going to keep growing.
Great. Are there any questions or responses to, yes, to T?
I know that you said you are more interested in this space that we cannot see here, but also I'm thinking if you already thought to use, because when we use that, we also have some kind of, experience doing that. This is really beautiful to see how people is getting some kind of, movement, trying to understand what's happening here. And they also don't see their own dance, but actually this is a kind of, I could say, a kind of principle of dance. You never see what you're moving, what you're doing. So I was thinking about this resonate when you're doing the presentation right there. I was seeing that many people like chalking on the wall and trying to understand because they could not see their own dance in this concrete space, the carbon space too. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, were you asking about if I've kind of thought about how to include that, or was kind of more a reflection on having watching people?
It's just, it's a resonate. I don't know.
Yeah.
If you already thought about how to think about what happened when someone put this and this movement they produce in this space, which is not the space inside of the VR.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. At this point, it's so wonderful to be able to facilitate this experience, and for many people who've spent very little time in VR, because it's a lot of like almost babysitting, but in this really lovely way. And I kind of I have to enter this conversation about is it okay if I touch you? Is it okay if I do this? So yeah, it's wonderful. And I mean, I've also been inviting people from the age of 7 to 77, literally, to enter VR, many of them for the first time. So to watch how that changes people's body, how something like fear, curiosity, confusion, it's like learning to walk again. So to see all of these people have these experiences and navigate it in different ways, yeah, it's a lovely
It's a bit dizzy as you're you're putting is my body and it's not the same.
Yeah, it makes people sick too. So does this realm.
I think what I really appreciate, though, just to pick up on what you're discussing, in the gaming world, and I don't know a lot about gaming, but there's this kind of onboarding, right? The language of onboarding to get into it. And I think what I really appreciate and see or sense is like there is this method, seeing as we're talking also about methods this week as well, where, you know, you're created that, doing that, the workshops. I really appreciated when I did the experience of doing the workshops is that was also a way of you holding space, and actually kind of this threshold space. So, because I was also aware of people before me that you were bringing in their, let's just say, analog work. I'm forgetting the question. Oh, you could put anything you want. What?
Like, it's kind of like, what would you like to last forever?
Right.
Like make an eternal,
right.
Very vague.
Yes.
Purposefully.
But for me, knowing that there was the presence of other people's thinking and thought around that, and that there was this real, the haptic, tangible, this kind of materiality of the drawings or the offerings or the objects that were made, somehow was like, for me, you holding this space that allowed me to feel much freer and at peace in terms of how I navigated the other world. So you're creating this really beautiful transition space.
Great, thank you. I think another thing about making the physical object is we so often think of technology and making physical things as being this kind of binary, that's a huge generalization, but it's either you're sitting at your computer and doing something or you're painting over here, and it feels like it's hard to make the two meet. So this is kind of an attempt to make them meet. And I think also if someone's first experience of VR, one of their first, is having made something and then being able very quickly to see it in front of them, to be able to walk through it, has the potential to shift how we receive these technologies, and to feel like there's this agency that's possible. Like, this is all self-taught. It's kind of hard to do, but it's not that hard to do. So I really want it to feel like it's accessible. There's no need to fear these technologies in and of themselves. We can fear where we might go with it. But I think it's really important to maintain that agency and be playful and curious and, serious about it.
Great. Thank you, T. So we can all partake or get into that play after our tour. Okay, let's keep moving on to Adela is here.
Yeah, if we're going to, Is it possible to put the sound of the video on? Or? Thank you. Okay, hi everyone again, thank you. So I talked about this project in my presentation, so I'm just going to add a few things probably and see if people have further questions. So I guess one of the things that I've been thinking about, in terms of site specificity and the situatedness of this work, and not only through this residency, but before, in terms of how to present a project that's so situated outside of that space. And especially when language is also, translation is also one of the things that needs to be considered. And translation is something that, so that's why I wanted to also put a little bit of the sound, because that's something I didn't manage, as you noticed in the presentation. So the sound is very important because that's where you can hear people talking about their own personal story. So I think that's a very important aspect of the project, to hear it firsthand. But then, of course, it brings to the problem of translation, right? So, but translation has been part of the project since the beginning, because many of these people, all of the people I work with are Purépecha speakers, right? Many of them are bilingual, many of them are trilingual, because they have migrated to the US, and so they also learn English, sometimes even before Spanish. So when I was there working, of course, my collaborators were helping me with the translation. Sometimes then the interviews with most of them are professors and people from the Indigenous Council. They were all conducted in Spanish, not all of them, most of them in Spanish, and then the ones that were in Purépecha, then they helped me translate them, someone else from the community. So the thing about language and about sharing this storytelling firsthand is very important, not only for the project itself, but also within the community, right? And that was kind of we were all trying to do. One of the things we were trying to do, right, was to kind of communicate, although this story is very recent, You know, there are sometimes that kids, for example, don't really know the depth of it or haven't been told of the political aspects of what happened. So that's why the workshops were important as an intergenerational way of sharing these stories within the community. But then another aspect that's very important is how to share them outside, right? Like how to bring them, for example, to this space here, right? Or to the museum in Morelia, right? So I've been trying to adapt the project depending on where it's shown. So as you can see here, so I added the subtitles because I thought it is important to hear the people firsthand, but it's also important to understand what they're saying, right? So that's a decision I took specifically for this context. Then how to put together the testimonies with also the sound of the performance, right? The pyrotechnics. So that's also another decision of how to present the work. So when it was presented in Morelia, it was a bigger installation that included this video, what you're listening to. It also includes the music. That's also a very important aspect because the music is also telling a lot about not only, you know, with words, but also sensorially, I think affectively about the events and what happened and how people feel about this event. And it also included many of the sculptural elements that I talked about in my presentation. So I guess, I mean, I don't want to add much more to the project because you already heard about it. I was just having these thoughts about how to the issues of translation, and also, you know, how the politics of the project work within the community and outside of the community, right? Because, I mean, it's also important to retell the story, to visualize the story within the community and outside of the community in terms of them wanting this story to be told, first of all, how they want it to be told, right? And how this retelling of the story within the community and outside helps in their fight for justice and sovereignty, right? That was another thing I wanted to touch on because sovereignty is a continuous process. Sovereignty is not something that you just achieve and that's it, right? It's a continuous fight and struggle. So one of the things that they have to do in these sovereign communities is like constantly do the labor, right? Within the community, of course, right? Of having everyone, let's say, in the same channel, right? Because it's not that everyone agrees, right? Some people in the community want the political parties to come back in, right? Why? Because they had liaisons with them, and they were, you know, there are a lot of levels of politics within sovereignty, right? So one of the point of this project is actually to help in that, not to help, but to be part of that process of continuous, sovereignty as a continuous process. Yeah.
Thank you, Adela. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I was listening to your work, and I've been knowing a bit of like the diversity of work you've been doing in different communities. And I'm very curious, maybe it's a very complex answer. I guess it's an unresolved answer, I'm guessing from the beginning, but how would you like define your role in those communities? Like, do you set up, yeah, yeah.
I mean, I usually try to use it's probably a metaphor, right? But that's I think it works, is like a weaver, right? Because they tell me all of these stories and I have to weave them together in a way to communicate them through art, let's say, right? And I also, weaving is a collective action. So I think that's kind of my role, right? Like I listen, I also always come with a project because I think it's also important. And I think it's an important part of my role, because, and now I'm getting into something else, right? But there's a lot of relational art, right? That's about conversations. And I think that's not the kind of art that I'm doing, right? It is a lot of conversations and a lot of listening and a lot of talking through things. For example, the project I'm doing in Peru, I mean, I have so many recordings already of just conversations that happened. On my phone. I'm not even going to use them, right? But I have them. So it's a lot about that. But I don't see my work as being just relational, right? Because I think if it stays on the level only of the conversations, then we don't make anything out of it, right? So I believe that it's kind of making together, right? So in order to make together, I need to come with a proposal and then from there be open to modify it and change it, right? So I think, I don't know. I mean, probably weaver sounds like a very romantic way of defining it. But I think at the end, it's kind of what happens, right? Like I end up like, doing things that I never thought I would be doing, right? So that means that I'm not coming with a plan that I need to, perform till the end. It's more like I'm always open to see what we can do together, basically.
I have a question that is a little bit like the following Sarah. It's when you leave the place and the project's hands, do you stay in contact with the people? And how that works?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I have so many friends now there in Arantepacua, right? And I mean, also the thing is that we try to see the project as ongoing, I guess, right? Because also like one of the commitments was to these kind of things, right? Like bring it to other spaces. But the true commitment is actually to bring them to talk about it, not me. Because I think at the end it's important to acknowledge that it should be them talking about, what happened and not me. So we're still on that, right? I mean, the thing is it's always the funding part of it, because of course we could do Zoom, but that's not really what they want, right? They want to actually like go with the project and the presentations. So that's one of the commitments that I still have specifically with them. So we've been discussing how to do that. Maybe in the near future, hopefully. But also, I try to, there are still things where I mean, I need to go back soon because I've been going back actually. But this time I need to go back for a specific reason, is that some of the weavings are still being made because we didn't finish. It was a lot because at some point we didn't have enough resources or time, and they really wanted all the chronology to be complete. So we really wanted to finish those textiles. So the communications are ongoing. That's when I was saying yesterday about WhatsApp as being like an essential tool in Latin America. I mean, I actually mean it, right? Like it's also like through WhatsApp that I communicate with them. I mean, yeah, and it's also that they changed the Indigenous Council is now a new one, right? So I'm also trying to understand how these changes within the government are also like part of this, political organization that is also very precarious in a way, right? It can fall apart in any moment, right? So I try to also talk with them about those things that are not necessarily related to the project. I don't know if that answers it.
I have a question might be related to that, but how do you share authorship? Because these projects are under your name and as you're the main author of this, and this seems like it's a whole production of different people working with you. So how that process is, and also how do you share the authorship that comes, or what it comes with authorship is also authority, the authority of how there's the decisions from, if you do, like if this is going to be shown in certain places, do you ask them, like, do they feel comfortable it is part of their process, or not process, but politics of how they are being displayed also within the screen, right? Like how that whole negotiation goes through.
So this project has shared authorship. So when I presented, I mean, the video says my name as because it's the video itself, right? But the project, when the whole project is presented, it's presented as a Communal Council of Arantepacua 2019-2020 and me, because those were the main producers, right? I mean, and then all of the credits of the participants. So as you can see, it only says direction and production on my name, right, for that specific video. But the whole project, I don't know if it's here. There you go. It's a Consejo Comunal Indígena de Arantepacua and Adela Goldberg. So that's the authorship we decided together because, I mean, of course, there were participants from all over the community that you can, I do my best to always include all of the names. It's just, it was a lot of people. So for example, here I didn't include the weavers because we didn't present the weavings, but I tried to, everything that's presented here, I tried to put the names of people, the testimonies and the video and the people that help with the video. So the decisions about when to show it and how to show it are taken with the people I work directly, right? So this communal council, so the communal council is actually 12 people, but it was 3 of them that actually were kind of like ¿cuál es la palabra? Like the council decided that those 3 people were going to take charge of this project because they are all dealing with many other things. So I work very closely with those 3 people. So, and one of them is kind of the one I work more with because she's a woman. So Maestra Juana is with whom I consult everything, right? So that's kind of like whenever something is going to be shown or, now there's a possibility of showing a more complete installation here at the Mexican Cultural Center, is that the name? So I already talked with them about it, and they're, one of the things is that they really want to come, but now there are no resources, so we're trying to negotiate all of that. But yeah, I mean, it's a complicated subject, of course, right? Because also, I mean, at the end, I have the materials, right? I mean, of course, they approved everything, right? Before me showing anything, I showed them the editing of the film, right? The sound, for example, the testimonies, that was something that I shared not only with the council, but also with all the people that gave me interviews, the professors, basically, so that they could tell me, like, is it okay? Is the chronology right? Did I get it right? Et cetera, et cetera. So I actually just made a few adjustments that they mentioned. But I try to do my best to actually like honor, what they decide. And of course they do their own meetings, right, within the community to kind of take decisions of everything. Honestly, I've been to many assemblies, and also they're very complex. The complexity of the assemblies and the decision making is also, for me, something that I still need to kind of think more about. Yeah. Sorry, I hope I answered.
Thank you, Adela. And we're going to conclude our tour with Sergio. Thank you.
Well, actually, these materials here, they are part of a larger piece that I call While We Dance, Mientras Bailamos. The original title is in Spanish. I produced this situated performance project in 2019 when I was living in Cali. Yesterday, I talked a lot about how the process was built. But to give an idea, I produced 7 pieces that I accumulated through 5 actions during 1 month, mostly. It started because I moved to Cali in 2019 to do artistic residency there. It was a residency that I made. I didn't say that yesterday, but I did this residency because I lived in Cali in 2008. And in 2009, I came back to Cali to participate of an event. Actually, it was the Encuentro in Bogota. And someone stole my bag on the airport, and I lost all my archive. The video that I produced, the film that I produced there, I lost all of that. So I had this kind of trauma, and then I backed 10 years later to reenact the project. I was thinking that I will redo the move again, etc. I will meet people. And what happened? My neighbor started to shoot my window for 3 consecutive weeks. And I was writing a paper about choreographies of the new fascism in Brazil. And I started to have this situated, presence that, the new fascism actually is a everyday fascism. So I started to connect that right moment with other moments that I lived in other houses, in other places. So, and there was a coincidence that the last house that I lived in Rio was shot by a rifle bullet that came from the helicopter from the police in Rio, who was surveilling a favela. This stray bullet crossed that window and shocked the wall of the bedroom that I was, it was a house of a friend of mine. She, a long story. So I started to connect these homes in Cali and in Rio, and understanding my practice as a theorist, how this practice of be thinking was connected to my everyday life. So how think neo-fascism right here and now, but actually the here and now is not just here and now, it's connected to a long history of colonialization in the Americas, and also the current neoliberalism and how the neoliberalism and neo-fascism and neo-colonialism are connected. So this specific piece, this doesn't come together. This is another thing. Here I have like an archive, a personal archive mixed with some archives that friends of mine sent to me, and other archives that I found online that you see, bodily struggles taking the streets in different corners in the Americas. So I have videos. This is a far-right movement in Brazil, convoking the fascists to defend their nation. So in there, I'm showing another footage of a protest in June 2013 in Brazil, that the police is attacking the protesters. Now changed to Chile. So these images, they are facing each other. You cannot see both at once. You have to position your body, or I see that, or I see that. I cannot see both. I need to know. I have to make a decision to do that. And also I'm invaded by the sound that comes from here and from here too. So this exercise of which position I take to be related with this archive is very important for the piece. This other material that I brought here is one of the sheets that I used to change the facade of the house, because in front of this house there was one of the main avenues in Cali. So my house was here. The building that someone was shooting my window was here. So in this street, a lot of protesters were taking the street, fighting against the Negro state in Colombia. So this "Don't Shoot, No Dispares, No Atire" was connecting with this relation between neighbors, but also with the struggles on the streets, and not only in Cali, but also the whole hemisphere. I was coming, in that moment I was coming from my last visiting scholar period in New York, when Black Lives Matter took the street for the first time, and that, that they said so loudly that the hands up, don't shoot. These words was so present in my memory in that moment. So I was trying to also connect to this memory. So what the Mientras Bailamos piece in a large sense does is identify these choreographies that is putting my body in some rhythm of violence, of a state of violence in different lands and geographies in the Americas, and also how I counter choreograph this specific experience that I have, that's not only my own memory, but also a collective memory. So I call it as tele-encounter choreography, because I'm thinking more the spatialization of these memories that is not concentrated in just me, but in something that is related to the other. So there also I have another trace of the lecture performance that I did yesterday, that I presented yesterday, because the end of the series was this lecture performance. There was a space to make, a space to have a radical dialogue with the neighbors, with other colleagues, other artists and friends that was living in the same situation than myself. And I use this lecture performance, I change every time that I present. I use this methodology to keep the conversation on. So for here, I prepared on a specific format to present in 20 minutes. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergio. Before we wrap up the tour and kind of exist collectively in the space to take in some of the work for the time we have left, is there anybody who would like to comment or has questions for Sergio? Laura?
Thank you so much. I have a quick question. So just trying to, can you talk a little bit about the idea of tele in relation to choreography? Because we often, when we talk about your work, we talk about counter choreographies. So is tele, like, are you thinking in terms of telematic? Are you, yes? Yeah, can you talk about that? And is that part of what's going on here in the relay and the facing monitors?
Yes, telechoreography is related to this multiple distance that I understand that's the materiality of dance. Because when you see, I was telling something to T when I was talking with her here. When I see someone dancing, actually the dance is not there. The dance is a kind of relation that experience is producing in my own body, that also is moving with her or making connection points to other memories, other sensations. So the dance is nothing that is just right here, right now, and just one thing. What you call as experience of dancing actually is always a spatiality movement. So you're producing some kind of spatiality movement. So the tele, that is distance, is the radical to refer to distance. So it's this production of distance. So what I do, the strategy that I do to produce this piece is to understand, okay, I'm here, and so I'm here, and this neighbor is, shooting my window for 3 weeks, but actually this is also connecting to other experience that I have with the theory that I'm writing on here, but also is connected with other stuff, and all these materials. I have the cratesh of the bullet cratesh. I have these theoretical materials. All of that is producing some kind of experience of dance. So what I try to do is redesign these different materials to produce another dance. So it's another. So I'm inviting the person to get in another dance. So this distance and transformation through the distances that never come back to the beginning is always another experience. That's what I call telechoreography. And the same movement is a counter choreographic gesture, because it's also challenging the sovereign, or the sovereign moment. Like, oh no, the dance is this. No, actually it's producing and being counter-produced through the navigation that I'm doing with this material. So it's a way also of healing. Like doing that, I can also lead with this state of violence that I have been experienced every day. So the counter choreographic also comes from this.
I think what actually I think what would be great actually is if we finish the tour and the live streaming of the tour, and then those of us are here and we have guests visiting can actually speak with us with the work that's here. Does that sound okay to everybody? Because we will be here for another 45 minutes. So let's do that. So I wanted a big shout out to and thank you, heartfelt thanks to Anna, Doug, Jax, Mackay, at Forest Space for hosting us and embracing, as that beautiful word, embracing us all week, and even some of our shenanigans, the political ones, of course. Political shenanigans. That's a good hashtag. And I have really, I'm speechless. I'm still speechless. You guys, I'm speechless because this work is so powerful and so nourishing, and us being able to take collective responsibility for holding each other and facing each other for these last 5 days has been a very, very profound and powerful experience for me personally. And Adela and I don't know, Adela, if you want to say something, because we got into this together on this side of things, and then bringing in Tracy and Laura, and none of this could have happened without all of us participating and being sensitive to the touch of our participation.
No, well, I have many thoughts in my mind, but I'll try to be brief. And first of all, I wanted to thank Shona for the opportunity, because it was amazing. Thank you so much. And to, of course, thank you to everyone who came, because honestly, I mean, especially today, I don't know, I guess it's been because it's the end, I guess. But today in the morning, I woke up and I was like very, very touched, I have to say. And it's difficult for me to be touched, I have to say. So it was a little bit, yeah, like I woke up and I was like, it was very intense experience, and really, significativa. I don't have the word in English right now. So I'm saying that truly, no? So thank you everyone, because I know it was intense and it was, to follow like all of the activities, but I think most of you did, and that was part of what made this very special. So thank you for sharing, and I think also the way in which everything happened organically. Also, at least my experience is that it was by steps that I approached each of your works, right? So that helped me kind of understand them better, I guess, right? Or feel them better, right? So I had first we discussed them on Monday a little bit with some of you, right? Like one-on-one, but then people presented about their work, and now we're having this final wrap up, and also the workshops for with some of you. So I don't know, for me that experience, scaffolded experience, was really interesting on how it really made me think more about not only the projects, but about how they connect with each other. So thank you to everyone.
Great. Okay, that's a wrap. Let's spend the rest of the time here taking in some of this work. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for those of you tuning in, and thank you for those of you coming through into this space, meet these amazing artists, and talk to them about their incredible work.